Hello, welcome back to my outdoor channel. Another installment of my podcast. This week, I've decided to talk about stories about my father. My father died on December 21st, 2015, and I spoke at his funeral, and I had many family members ask me if I could write down or if they get a copy of what I spoke about. And I told them, well, I didn't write anything down, I just talked about stories. So this will be a way to just record and save for the future, document the stories I told about my father. My father was born on September 11th, 1932 in Blackfoot, Idaho, to Sam and Bessie Gardner. His early life, the favorite stories he talked about was growing up on a ranch. My grandfather, I guess I need to back up for just a moment. My grandfather actually started out in the construction business when my dad was, that was his business. He had a construction company. He ran with his two brothers. And then he was trying to work his way out of construction, and they started ranching. They bought a ranch, which would be north of Blackfoot, where Jensen's Grove is now. There's a lake there and a park, and that was my dad's first memories of that ranch, learning to ride, and helping his father and his uncle. Actually, it would have been his cousin, Ellis Arm. Now, some of the stories from the ranch, I could go on and on. We could fill up hours of just talking about his childhood. But one of the stories he always told about is how he kept his father out of World War II because he had a broken leg. And the way my grandfather's leg got broken was my dad was messing around. He's about 10 years old, and he was roping on foot in a pen, roping calves. And he got rope on a calf, and he couldn't get it back off. His father started hollering for him. He said, "Come on, we need to go. We got things to do." And he goes, "Well, I can't get my rope off." He goes, "Oh, open the gate." And my grandfather rode in on a horse his name was Sonny, and he tied off on that and went down the rope. He's going to flank the calf, get the rope off. And just as he was getting to him, that calf lunged forward, hit him in the leg, busted his leg. So when his number came up to be drafted for World War II, he had a busted leg. But it never slowed him down doing ranch work. He was still riding with a broken leg. He kind of made a special stirrup. And Dad would tell stories about my grandfather riding through the brush chasing cows, and he just lay that leg behind him. And it didn't slow him down much. Another of my father's favorite stories is one time they had a bunch of rain, the river was coming up, and they had some cows stranded on an island. And so they swam their horses over to get them, to bring them back across the river. And when they were coming back, they had to swim their horses. And my grandfather asked Dad if he wanted to ride Sonny, and Dad told him, "No, I'll ride Sweetheart." Sweetheart was a little paint mare that my dad had. He goes, "You sure? Sonny's a high swimmer." He goes, "No, I'll be okay. I'll stay on Sweetheart." And so grandfather and Ellis took their horses in the river, and they both dropped and started swimming and dropped all the way down, which meant they both got soaked. Dad stayed on Sweetheart. He climbed on top of his saddle, and she went into the water, and she kept him up, and he crossed the river, came through it without getting wet. Now, as the years went by, things changed, and they ended up selling the ranch and going back into the construction business. My father he got his driver's license when he was 12 years old. My grandfather took him to the courthouse, said, I need him to have a driver's license, and they gave him a license. He started driving dump trucks when he was 14 years old. So by the time he was a senior in high school, he was a seasoned construction worker. He started out driving dump trucks, and then later, when he was about, I believe, 19 years old, they're using him as a blade operator. And he was very skilled blade operator, and I've talked to many people who knew my father, talked about the skill level he had. Now, by the time I was born, he was no longer in the construction. Now, he got married to my mom in 1951. A year later, they moved to Las Vegas. My grandfather broke off the partnership with his brothers, left everything, and moved to Las Vegas and started again. While they were in Vegas, they threw in with a couple different companies. My grandfather was superintendent for Wells Fargo. My dad was working for Carl E. Nelson, and they also did jobs with a guy named Layliff Woods. But they built the first road, the first paved road. There was a road there, but they built the first paved road into Glen Canyon Dam. That was a story my father shared a lot, how they actually had to build their own trailer court. They could live out there and do this job. Unfortunately, in 1957, my grandfather died of a heart attack, suddenly. He was 51 years old. So at that point in time, my father moved his family, and his mother and his brothers all came back to the eastern Idaho, to the Blackfoot area. And he worked for Eastern Idaho Construction, which was his uncle's. He came back to work for them. He did that up until 1967, which is the year I was born, which time he went into the restaurant business. And that was their first foray into the restaurant business. It was actually a fast food place called Humpy's Dump, which is well known in the Blackfoot area. My father's favorite things in life were horses, but being in Idaho, you have a lot of snow. We have good winters, so you needed something to do for the wintertime, and he really enjoyed snowmobiling. My brothers and I and my sister, we all grew up riding snow machines with Dad, my mom, and my mother. And we had a lot of adventures. One of the biggest adventures was, it would have been 1976. My dad, my brother Brian, and my brother Greg were riding up behind an area up in the Wolverine area. There's an area there called the Girls Camp. And they were up behind Girls Camp. And my dad was turning around by a creek, and the bank gave way, the snow bank gave way, and his snow machine crashed down. He hit his knee on the running board of the sled and broke his leg. And they spent the rest of the day getting him out of there. Dad kept Brian there. They built a fire. He sent Greg out to call two guys. Two of Dad's friends was a guy named Dean Weiser and Frank Miles. And he told Greg, go call him. You can tell them where we are. They can get in here to us. Go ahead. And so Greg went out. He got to where he'd get to a phone. And he called Dean Weiser's wife. Told him where they were. She got a hold of Dean on a CB radio. And they had actually been up there riding that day. They turned around and went back up to help get my dad out. Greg borrowed a dog sled from a rancher right there at the bottom of Wolverine Canyon. And he went back in. And he got back in there, and Frank and Dean were not far behind him. They got in there because they knew where the area they were at. And my dad had broke his leg about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and they finally went through the adventure of getting him out of there and got him back to the hospital at 1 o'clock in the morning. That was one of the wildest snowmobile trips. There were several, but in essence of time, I can't keep going on and on. And I'm going to have to break these stories into segments. Otherwise, you'll be sitting there listening for 30 minutes at a shot, and that's probably not good either. So we'll wrap this up. We'll call this part 1. We'll get this out, and thank you for listening. Please subscribe. Please like the video, and we'll look forward to part 2. Thank you.